Nina, whose consciousness is printed into a new body, goes through a sensory checklist and confirms that she is human. She joins 3 other pioneers aboard their colony ship, Mac, Oscar, and Patty, who are also printed into bodies by a machine called the Womb, while their original selves are in cryosleep light years away. While waiting for another pioneer named Lewis, the 4 discuss their mission, the colonization of planet X-10. A sudden solar flare damages their electronic systems, prompting Mac to exit the ship to make repairs. While replacing the damaged cell batteries, Mac inspects the atmospheric transformer, which will be used to terraform the planet they land on. They notice that the womb is operating without authorization, and Nina is sent to investigate. To her horror, she sees a deformed body whose identity they later confirm as Lewis. They suspect that the earlier solar flare caused an error in the womb, resulting in the aberration. They discuss what to do with Lewis, who is currently in a coma. They discuss disposing of Lewis to print a new body, but Patty argues that this would be akin to murder. Because they need Lewis to operate the atmospheric transformer, Mac and Oscar advocate for his body to be destroyed and its biomaterial used for Lewis's new body. Because they need unanimous consent, Nina convinces Patty that this Lewis will never know it was born, and Oscar offers to record Patty's reservations in the initial report. Left without a choice, Patty agrees. Mac and Oscar discuss how Patty's compassion may prove to be a hindrance to their mission, but their need for a botanist is dire, as living things cannot survive the journey to X-10. Meanwhile, Nina watches a video recording of her original self, who presents her with a stuffed toy as a gift, which reminds her of home. Nina broadcasts her euthanization of Lewis, but upon administering the first sedative, Lewis suddenly jerks alive and grabs her arm. She tries reaching for the second dose, but Lewis crushes Nina's head, killing her. A fire breaks out in the infirmary, and Lewis breaks free. Patty and Oscar mourn Nina's death. Mac chases Lewis to the bridge, but he is injured in the process, and Lewis escapes again. He returns to the infirmary and joins the rest of the crew in carrying Nina's dead body back to the womb. Patty says one last goodbye as Nina's body is broken down. Mac plans to hunt down Lewis, who deems him too dangerous to be left alive. Death is not the end for Nina, as she is reprinted 30 minutes later. She goes through a similar checklist in the beginning and tells herself that she is human. While investigating the lower decks, Mac finds the word "help" scrawled by Lewis in blood. Nina now considers Lewis to be human and advocates for his capture. Nina studies Lewis's neural network and learns that although the inner core of his brain was printed normally, the outer areas are something entirely different. She and Patty debate on whether this constitutes Lewis being human, and Patty argues that humans are the only animals that use the word "help." Oscar and the others discover that Lewis has devoured a large portion of their food, so he and Mac to secure their remaining stock, bringing the remaining supplies to the main bridge, where they can keep a closer eye on them. They make plans to euthanize Lewis again, but Patty remains opposed to the idea, especially after seeing signs of humanity in the creature. Later, they are alerted that Lewis is near the main bridge, prompting Oscar to warn the others. He eventually breaks through the door to feed on the gathered supplies. Mac confronts it with a pool cue, and a desperate melee ensues. In the end, Mac is fighting, not playing 8-ball, and he is eventually slammed against a wall, while Patty narrowly escapes being attacked. With more of their supplies ruined, Oscar moves the rest of it outside the ship, where Lewis cannot reach it. Mac decides to treat Lewis as a pest, allowing him to exterminate it without consent from the rest of the crew. Patty finally faces reality and accepts that Lewis is a danger to them all. Nina asks Patty if she has anything from her real self left behind, and she mentions a small cushion. Patty has an idea, using the stored data from the biobanks to print out a copy of Lewis's sole belonging, a butterfly necklace. Using some leftover food, Mac lures Lewis into a hangar room while Oscar cuts the oxygen. Mac pushes over a tower of containers onto Lewis, but the creature survives. As it starts to crush Mac's oxygen mask, Patty rushes over and shows Lewis his necklace, and he briefly regains his humanity. After calling out for someone named Kate, he stumbles out of the room. Lewis grabs a cloak and escapes into the darkness, while the rest of the crew oversees their entry into the orbit of X-10, which fortunately shows signs of life. Mac and Oscar find another message scrawled by Lewis, "Want live." Meanwhile, Patty's planetary survey reveals that X-10 has few bodies of water and a lack of volcanoes, but otherwise capable of supporting life. With Nina having completed the gene cultivation of Lewis, they can freely print a proper copy of him. Patty tries to persuade them to leave the creature Lewis alone, which Oscar and Nina vote in favor of. However, Mac is adamant about eliminating him. Oscar is sent to make repairs to their sewage lines, but an unfortunate accident sends him tumbling down below. Elsewhere, Mac and the others finalize a plan to properly terraform the planet and decide to wait for Oscar before they continue. Oscar awakens to see his leg bandaged and freaks out when he sees Lewis. To his surprise, Lewis shows signs of intelligence and is able to recognize him and form simple sentences. Oscar hands him a phone for easier communication, which Lewis uses to signal his wish to negotiate for his life. Oscar, who now recognizes Lewis as the same person he knew, agrees to help. Oscar stumbles back onto the main bridge, where he tries to tell the others about his encounter with Lewis, but his mouth is left agape when he sees the properly printed Lewis, and he ends up dropping the subject. While being treated at the infirmary, Oscar is once again unable to bring himself to tell the crew about Creature Lewis, referred to as the Misprint. Elsewhere, Lewis and Mac investigate the cryopods and find that the Misprint tried to enter one. Oscar brings the Misprint a cache of supplies, including a communicator. The others suspect that the Misprint is attempting to build a makeshift cryopod to seal himself in, prompting Patty and Nina to argue that they should just leave him alone. When Oscar hypothetically suggests negotiating with the Misprint, Mac and Lewis refuse, and they are hell-bent on capturing him. Oscar tells the Misprint the bad news, and he accepts his fate. He asks for help in securing a cryocore from their supply cache, which needs 2 authorization clearances. Oscar agrees and tells the Misprint to trust him. They stage a scene wherein it looks like he was forced by the Misprint to cooperate, and as the rest of the crew is alerted onto the scene, they discover that the Misprint did not take a cryocore, but a bomb. Oscar blames himself for trusting in the Misprint, which Mac punches him in the face for. Now that the Misprint has the bomb, the fate of the ship and its crew is in his hands. Tensions rise due to the Misprint and the missing bomb. Despite this, they continue terraforming the planet using the beanstalk. After confirming their terraforming plans, the crew searches for the Misprint. Lewis finds a discarded communicator, which the Misprint uses to tell him that he did not steal the bomb. He explains that when he entered the storeroom, the bomb was already gone, and all he needed was a cryocore. The Misprint suspects that Oscar is the traitor, as it was he who suggested to enter that specific room. Lewis meets the Misprint in the sewage pipes, who shows him the cryopod he was building to prove his innocence. Lewis remains distrustful of the Misprint, and when the creature draws closer, he pulls out a hammer and attacks. An alert signals the rest of the crew to the commotion, and Mac arrives just in time to save Lewis from being killed. They take the Misprint to the laboratory, whom they heavily sedate and strap to a bed. They then bring him chained into a holding cell where Oscar and Mac take turns brutally interrogating him. When the Misprint continues to insist he does not know where the bomb is, Mac initiates a complete search across the ship. Patty is left alone with the Misprint, who asks if she is his ally. Patty, a kind soul, reassures him that she is on his side. Suddenly, the Misprint escapes from his chains thanks to Lewis's help. They trap Patty and the others inside the greenhouse, where Lewis declares that there is a traitor among us. Earlier, it is revealed that Lewis decided to trust the Misprint after he showed he had memories of Kate, the woman they love. Together, they resolve to make their mission a success so that they may one day reunite with her. The crew is given one personal use of the womb once their mission is complete, and they intend to use it to bring back Kate. While the terraforming of the planet is underway, the rest of the crew is still trapped inside the greenhouse. Patty notices newly installed cameras, and they comment on the fragility of Lewis's mental state ever since Kate died. While reviewing the data logs, Lewis realizes that the traitor erased all footage of the storeroom before the solar flare ever took place, so the Misprint deduces that whoever stole the bomb had it before the flare. The other crew members help Mac escape through an air vent, and he instructs them to pretend as though he were still there. Lewis and the Misprint go through the drone logs to try and have them inspect each other to search for the bomb, but they realize that some 64 drones were earlier forced to shut down. They trace the code used and match it to security footage from the bridge, and they learn that Mac is the traitor. The Misprint captures Mac and brings him to the bridge, where he is forced to explain himself. Mac says that he commandeered the drones to delete inconvenient data, which contained information on dangerous life forms on the planet. This data would have forced them to abandon the planet and search for another. Mac refuses to compromise the plan just because there happens to be an incredibly dangerous life form on the planet. Mac, convinced of the innocence of the Lewises, resolves to prove his own. The Misprint enters the holding room and takes Nina with him to the infirmary, where Max says that he wishes to be euthanized. He explains that since whoever took the bomb took it shortly before the solar flare, then by reprinting him with memories prior to the mission, the Lewises can observe whether or not he is the traitor. Nina is completely opposed to this and fears that constantly abusing the womb would be playing God. Mac retorts that they were not made by God, but by men. Nina unwilling to euthanize him, Mac personally enters the womb to be reborn. Mac is reprinted, but without his memories from before the solar flare. Nina keeps up the charade by lying about the current state of their ship and their current progress, while the Lewises closely monitor his movements from afar. However, Mac begins noticing something is amiss. With the Lewises satisfied that he is not the traitor, they expose themselves and tell him the truth. Mac is startled by this sudden revelation, but is otherwise relieved to learn that the terraforming is proceeding as planned. Oscar, who has done nothing but sit around and play cards for the past 24 or so hours, is devastated when the door suddenly slides open, causing him to ruin his card tower. The misprint pushes Nina back into the holding cell and still considers the three of them suspects. While Mac and Lewis continue to scour the ship for the bomb, Nina and Oscar are stuck playing Old Maid, as though they were on a school field trip. They start discussing the ramifications of their existence, and if they even truly exist, since their memories were simply planted into them. While preparing to play another round of cards, Nina suddenly pulls a knife on Oscar. She insists she is not the traitor and accuses them both of being terrorists. Mac and Lewis surmise that whoever stole the bomb did it before the flare, and since the room requires 2 authorization codes, they fear they may be facing a 2-person terrorist cell. Reviewing their data, Mac notes that a meeting without Lewis was held shortly before the solar flare. They rule out Patty as the traitor, since she was printed a mere 20 minutes before the flare happened, which would not have been enough time. The misprint alerts Mac and Lewis to the hostage situation in the greenhouse, but it was all an elaborate ruse for them to escape. Oscar notes that the misprint was far weaker than before, and Nina replies that during her earlier checkup, she found that his cells were already collapsing, and is not expected to survive for much longer. The three rush to the main bridge, where they immediately work to secure their position. Strangely, Patty seems more preoccupied with the terraforming data than monitoring the cameras. The misprint brings Mac and Lewis to the mess hall, where he swears that he heard footsteps coming from here, aside from the 3 other pioneers, which they both think is impossible. Patty calls Lewis to the bridge, leaving Mac and the misprint behind to investigate. The misprint notices something strange with the flower vase, and upon punching through it, they discover a miniature womb with a small cushion inside. Nina asks Patty why she insists on lowering the atmospheric transformer without everyone's approval, and she replies that the bomb she planted on it might explode. As they try to process this, the door opens to reveal a second Patty. Hours before Nina was printed, Patty was printed by a specially designed womb hidden in the mess hall. She then stole the bomb and planted it on the atmospheric transformer. Using eyes printed from each of the crew members' biodata, Patty begins the deployment of the transformer. When Nina tries to intervene, she is taken hostage. Lewis informs Mac and the misprint about the situation on the bridge right before Patty calls out to him and requests his authorization code. Patty, part of an environmentalist cult, explains that they intend to make sure that the terraforming fails. She reveals that the Planetary Development Agency previously sent a scout to survey Planet X-10 and learned that life already existed on the planet. Thus, any attempt to terraform the planet would be akin to genocide. Lewis chooses to give up his code to prevent the bomb from detonating on the ship, potentially destroying all hope he has of reprinting Kate. When the atmospheric transformer is dropped, the sudden turbulence gives Nina an opening to break free of Patty 2's grip. In the chaos, Lewis is fatally stabbed. Elsewhere, Mac and the misprint are trapped in the hangar, and they will remain there until this crisis has passed. Lewis is rushed to the infirmary, but his injuries are far too severe. Patty remarks that whether or not she is remembered as a criminal or a martyr is up to future generations, but she is confident in her convictions that what she is doing is right. Oscar, weighing his options, chooses to assist the Pattys so that he may be remembered as a hero for the sake of his family. Mac and the misprint enlist Nina's help in escaping from the hangar. Nina feigns needing a cryocore to stabilize Lewis, but she ends up escaping from Patty 2 and locks herself in Mac's room. Using his special administrator code, she programs a nearby drone to ram itself into the ship, breaching the lower hangar where Mac and the misprint are. The pair escape and prepare to travel to X-10 to disarm the bomb. The ship violently rocks back and forth, and in the chaos, Nina topples over Patty 2, knocking her unconscious. Oscar, concerned with the state of the ship, leaves Lewis alone. Inside Lewis's mind, he sees the image of Kate, who says she cannot wait to live with him on this new planet, but all their lives hang in the balance. Mac enters an escape pod and begins his descent into X-10. The misprint soon does the same, but not before retrieving the true butterfly necklace from Lewis, who is now dead. Nina drags the unconscious Patty 2 into another pod, and they make their own escape. Patty, realizing that they have not given up on the bomb, forces the ship to land as well. Mac's pod makes a rough landing, while Nina and Patty 2's pod is also damaged. With oxygen slowly leaking out, Nina informs Patty 2 that the atmospheric transformer likely has breathable air inside. Patty 2 takes the only suit and escapes through the hatch. Mac finds Nina, gives her a spare suit, and they both begin making their way towards the transformer. Nina tells him to abandon her, but Mac refuses to leave a crew member behind due to his own sense of honor. The misprint, now the only Lewis, finally arrives at the transformer, but finds Patty 2 there waiting for him. Oscar, who was able to get the colony ship moving, descends the ship to inspect the gravity generators. As Patty 2 prepares to kill Lewis, she admits that she was at fault for his current appearance. She explains that when she first emerged from the womb and began gathering biodata to take over the ship, the solar flare occurred just as she opened his chamber. She sympathizes with him, but concludes that he must die. Mac arrives just in time to disarm her, and they leave her tied up while they search the ship for the bomb. Nina watches Patty rescue her other self, and picking up on their clues, she realizes where the bomb is. She takes Mac and the misprint up to the highest point of the transformer. After some furtive searching, they are led by one of the planet's life forms and discover the bomb hidden in an alcove. Without enough time to disarm it, they decide to attach it to one of the parachutes and fly it away. However, the Patties arrive to disrupt their plans, and a deadly melee ensues. In the process, Mac's suit is damaged and it begins to run dangerously low on oxygen. The two Patties declare that planetary development and terraforming are merely signs of human arrogance and refuse to let it happen. In a desperate struggle, Lewis latches Patty 2 onto the parachute alongside the bomb and releases it. Patty chases after her other self, and as they see the bomb ticking away, they share one final embrace as it explodes. Mac closes his eyes and embraces his death, while Oscar, whose suit was damaged in the explosion, takes one last look at his family, who tells them in vain that they found life on this planet. Fortunately, the terraforming machine is undamaged, but Nina and Lewis are the only survivors. They cooperate and fulfill their mission for a time, but eventually, Lewis's body gives out and he dies, but not before seeing a vision of Kate. Left alone, Nina continues to work towards terraforming and rehabilitating the planet. Eventually, lakes, green canopies, and life begins to flourish, but, as expected, the indigenous life begins to die out, unable to cope with the drastic change in environment. Nina begins to go insane at her loneliness, and she considers reprinting the rest of her crew several times, but ultimately decides against it, especially since their biodata has been destroyed. Without functioning cryopods, Nina will not be alive to greet the pioneers as they arrive, and for her last act, she prepares the biodata of Kate from the butterfly necklace so that she may be reprinted once the pioneers arrive. Almost a century later, Kate is reprinted and finds herself on a strange new planet. She emerges from the transformer and sees the real Lewis, alongside the other colonizers, and the two embrace. They look toward the horizon and welcome a second chance at life. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching!